so he can start presentation. Thank you.
Okay, generally, balance of payment is a record of all economic transaction between the population of a country and the rest of the world in a given period of time. So, as you can see in the slide now, I have made a simple equation for getting the net balance in Indonesia's balance of payment. There are three main components, three main items in the balance of payment, which is the first one is the current account, B, capital account, and C, private short-term capital, followed by errors and omission. So based on this equation, the addition of current account with the capital account will produce the basic balance, then add it with the third component, which is private short-term capital and errors and omission, to get the net balance. And this net balance which shows the value of the surplus or deficit in a particular year. So to more understand about this equation, let's look at Malaysia's balance of payment data series. Next slide. I took the balance of payments from year 1977 to 1981 as an example. So for the left-hand side, this is a summary of data for the current account, where as you can see, there are three minor components in the current account, which is the first one is balance of trade involving export and imports. The second one is services, and the third one is transfer. So let's look at part number one, which is the balance of trade in goods. As you can see, during the first 4 years, 1977 until 1980, the trade balance was always in a state of surplus until 1981, which indicated the occurrence of a deficit. This was due to the world economic recession that took place at that time, which continued until its peak in 1985. So for the others, I will continue by Hani. Go on, Hani.
Okay, I will continue for the next minor component, which is the services account. As you can see, it has several minor components in services account. Examining from the performance each year, it is found that the services account is always in a state of deficit, and it also has been increasing of deficit amount since 1977 until 1980, but it had a little bit drop in 1981. You can take a look from the series table. The next one, there is the net amount of unrequired transfer. It also has the same pattern with services account, whereas our country and the unrequired transfer in deficit state. After we calculate all the current account, the balance of current account has achieved a good result, where state of surplus has been reached from 1977 until 1979. But in 1980 and 1981, we have found a deficit figure because of the goods couldn't cover the total investment in the service account, as well as unrequired transfer due to the country experiencing an economic recession at that time. Let's take a look in 1980. We still had a big amount of goods rather than other years, but at the same time, the total of investment on services and unrequired transfer has bigger than goods. Then it's make a little bit struggle to our country to make it in surplus. Okay, on the right hand side, the next major component in balance of payment, which is BOP, is capital, where it's part of the balancing account before we reach a basic balance. In this account, there had only two part of minor, which is private short-term capital and official long-term capital. As we can see, from the 5 years, our country has remained in surplus amount. After we total up the current account and capital account, we can see the basic balance always stayed in surplus. We can see from the series data table. The other major component is private short-term capital, also error and omissions. Even the pattern on these two components has been deficit from the data series table, it doesn't mean give an worse impact to overall balance, because of our country's basic balance still can accommodate that deficit amount, and showing that our country has reached a surplus amount over 5 years. We have seen in this series of data that show the surplus and deficit in balance of payment, which is POP. So I pass it to the next presenter to discuss the reason for the causes of supplies and deficit. So I will pass to Shazwan now.
Thank you. So the graph shown balance of payment surplus and deficit from 1970 until 2020. So balance of payment surplus is a expectation of revenue collection are higher than expenses. It means total export are higher than total import. Balance of payment deficit is a expectation of revenue collection lower than expenses. A balance of payment deficit in a country can increase if said country import more than capital, goods and service. So that graph are two example 2011 and 2015. In 2011, balance of payment surplus record that because of balance of payment larger surplus, balance of payment recorded larger surplus mainly by the net inflow from financial account and surplus in current account. While 2015, balance of payment deficit recorded because of service account import are higher than export. So that's all from me. I will pass to the next presenter.
Okay, sure. Um, Balance of payment surplus. Next slide, please. Okay. Balance of payment surplus occurs when a country's total exports are higher than its imports. This helps to generate capital to fund its domestic productions. With a surplus in balance of payment, a country can also lend funds outside its borders. The country provides enough capital to pay for all domestic production, and the increase in exports will boost the production in its factories, allowing them to hire more people. And the next one, a balance of payments deficit means the nation imports more commodities, capital, and services than it exports. The country must take from other nations to pay for their imports. The detailed causes of surplus and deficit will be presented by someone else. So that is all from me. I will pass it to the next presenter.
Yeah, so I will explain which year we having a balance or imbalance balance of payment. As you can see from the graph, from 1989 until 1987 we are having a deficit, means imbalance, and 1998 until 2020 we are having a surplus or balance. The causes of imbalance mostly is from external factor. As you all know, Malaysia is one of the most open economy in the world, and it opens to investment that has been instrumental in employment creation and income growth. So in 1997, there was a crisis happened that causes our economy to become one of the example that affects our economies. The crisis started at Thailand, but luckily we managed to survive the crisis. So I will pass to next presenter to present what else that causes deficits.
Okay.
Akmal, kena unmute. Akmal? Unmute.
I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute my mic. All right. Okay, I'm gonna talk about balance of payment, disequilibrium, and equilibrium. So, when the demand and the supply of any foreign currency in a country in a given time period is equal, it is termed as equilibrium position. And a balance of payment, while a disequilibrium means that the condition is either deficit or surplus. But in a floating exchange rate, the supply of currency will always equal the demand for currency, and the balance of payment is zero. So therefore, we can see here, if there is deficit on the current account, there will be a surplus on the financial capital account. If there was an increase in interest rate, it would cause hot money flows to enter. Therefore, there would be a surplus on the financial account. So, what causes deficit imbalance of payment? There's a lot of factors, but we can be divided by three. So here is the factors: is economic factor, which is developmental activities, high rate of inflation, cyclical fluctuations, change in demand, import of services. The next is political factor, political instability, political disturbance, and next is social factor, demonstration effects, change in taste preference, fashion, and trends. So I'm going to give an example for the current account surplus narrowed in fourth quarter 2020 on higher services deficit. So we can see here that the services in here, deficit expanded attributable to higher payment for transportation services and sustained deficit in travel account, marginally lower as international border remain closed. So the service will remain closed to foreign tourists until a COVID-19 vaccine become widely available. So we can see here, this factor is related to here. It can be economic factor and it can be social factor. So that's all from me. I would like to pass to the next presenter.
Okay, so based on the previous presenters, we know that current account deficit is import is more than export. So, like, is it alarming or bad? It is very subjective. We cannot compare in between countries. So, but it's not entirely bad because, like, for the developing country, having a deficit account for a certain amount of period is very normal. And as long as the government or any other plans to recover the deficit account, but it will be alarming for a country to have a deficit more than 4 to 5 years continuously, mainly because, like, the government have to pump in more money to make the economy stable back. Next slide. Yeah, okay, Doctor. So as you can see, we had a spike in 2020. This is mainly because of the goods sector, mainly contributed from goods sector and our secondary income sector. This shows that having a good government plan can have an impact on the economy and recover from bad economics. Next slide, please. Current account. I'm not sure about this, Doctor. I think it's my camera problem. Can you give me a while? Doctor, I am not sure why is it not showing my face, and I'm sorry for that, Doctor. And so current account balance as percentage of GDP is just an indication of how competitiveness of a country in a global scale. So countries with a stronger current account balance per percentage will surely have more exports in the country and good amount of savings in their account. Next slide, please. This is the graph of the current account GDP, which shows the Malaysian current account as per percentage of GDP is 1 for 2020. To compare it for the average of 138 countries in a global scale, is negative 3.11. So this contributed from our good sector and our secondary income sector. That's all from me. I'll pass it to the next presenter. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, I'm sorry, doctor, I can't open my camera because my internet coverage is not really stable here. Okay, next, we will be looking at the reserve as percentage of the GDP. There's a correlation between this percentage and the duration of retained import. For example, the percentage is 2% in January 2021. Next slide, please. Okay, according to the statement by Bank Negara Malaysia, this percentage is equal to 8.6 months of retained import, happened in 29 January 2021. In order to achieve higher percentage, the duration of retained import should be shortened so that the export rate will increase as well, which will lead to the increment of the percentage too. Then we will proceed with the next presenter, Shazwan.
Amir, kena unmute. Amir?
Oh, sorry. Okay, I will look into the importance of having a balanced current account. To answer that pertaining question, we must look and analyze several circumstances. Circumstance number one is a country having too much current account deficit. That could be problematic because reason number one, it could be an indication of an unbalanced economy. The economy itself is focusing on short-term consumption rather than balancing it with investment for in the long run. Number two, in this situation, it is sustainable if the deficit is financed by loan from other country or international bank. And in the long run or in the long term, the country itself will be burdened by the debt and the interest that they need to pay to the lender. Number three, the value of currency would be depreciated. This is harmful because there is an insufficient capital flow to finance the deficit, and this will depreciate the exchange rate. As a result, imported inflation will happen for consumers and firms that relies on imports of raw material. That's the first circumstance. For the second circumstance is a country having too much current account supplies. Generally, having a current account supplies is beneficial, but having too much current account supplies could be harmful to the economy as well. Because number one, it could be harmful because it could be an indication of low spending by the consumers, and the domestic demand will weaken when people don't spend their money domestically. Second of all, current account surplus could lead to lower domestic employment. If the surplus is caused by a recession that affects the domestic demand and led to a fall in import spending. Or it could be a global recession where a surplus is caused by failing exports and a bigger fall in imports. So in conclusion, the government must strike a balance between having a current account surplus and a current account deficit to create a sustainable economy in the long run. With that, I pass to the next presenter.
Can you hear me?
I'm so sorry, my line right now is not very okay. Okay, as the last presenter, I'm going to present about ways to maintain balance of payment. Okay, the first one is strict policy measure to improve the balance of payments. We refer to the measure adopted to promote export and reduce import. The second one is expenditure reducing policy. The important way to reduce imports and thereby reduce deficit imbalance of payments is to adopt monetary and fiscal policy that aim at reducing aggregate expenditure in the economy. And the last one is expenditure switching policy. Expenditure switching policy would through changes in relative prices. Prices of import are increased by making domestically produced goods relatively cheaper. So, expenditure switching policy may lower the prices of export, which will encourage export of a country. So that's all from Group 10. Thank you. Um, in this way, by changing relative prices, expenditure switching policy help in correcting this disequilibrium in balance of payment, I think, for the last way to maintain balance of payment. That's all from us, Doctor, for Group 10.
Yeah, Doctor, we have it from T13. Can equilibrium happen in balance of payment? The answer will be yes. It can happen if we follow by the theory. It can, but it's not easy and impossible to happen because by many factors like economics and political and also social factors.
Yes, Doctor. Give us a few seconds.
You ask for transform. You want to see the data from 19. I don't have from 1917. I just have the data. It's not a graph. It's just exact value from 1947 until 1998. The balance of payment statistic in penyata, in bentuk penyata, not in the graph. Can I show the data, not the graph? I already have the data. Is it this, doctor, you want to see? The balance of payments? So, graph. Sorry. Sorry. But this I can explain, which is from 1961, we have a deficit, negative 16, our balance of payment, until 1964, this is deficit. But then we managed to encounter it. We have a surplus 1965 until, oh my god, and 97 drawbacks, and then is 1970 deficit, back, it's like that, and then this deficit 1973, we got a surplus, deficit 76, is surplus until 1981, 80. 1918 until we have a deficit until 1986. And then 1987 until 1989 we have a surplus back until 1989 until 1997. This is because 1997 there's crisis, which is Asian financial crisis, started in Thailand. Yes. Yes. Asian crisis. Yes. Yes. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, doctor. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, doctor. Sorry. 1998, after the crisis, our Prime Minister managed to find a way to, that time was Dr. Mahathir. We managed to find a way. I did some research, but yes. Yes. No. Yes. 1988. Thank you, doctor.
So, Assalamualaikum and good evening to Doctor and our fellow friends. So today we from T11 is which is group 6 sex 1. We present you guys about the fiscal and monetary policy economy Malaysia. So we start with the first presenter.
Alright, Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Mohd Shukri. Today I like to present consumer price index from 1997 until 2019. Based on the chart, we can see in 1998 and 2008 there was an increase in the highest consumer price index of 5.3% and 5.4%. However, in 2009 there was a sharp decline in the consumer price index from 5.4% and to 0.6%. In 1988, in the first half of the year, there was an increase in the inflation due to the depreciation of the ringgit. But after June 1998, higher than expected contribution in aggregate demand and excess capacity in the economy reduced inflationary pressure arising from the depreciation of the ringgit. Also in this year, monetary policy was adjusted to curb money aimed at curbing inflationary pressure arising from the depreciation of the ringgit as well as maintaining stability in the domestic financial market. In 2008, the year of the extraordinary economic crisis was the global economic recession, where rising crude oil price and the world food price, it made the food and non-alcoholic beverage and the transportation category were the major contributor to inflation in Malaysia. And after we faced the global economic crisis in 2008, in 2009, inflationary pressure in Malaysia in line with global and domestic development, where the decline in major inflation in 2009 was driven by factors related to supply and the calm demand condition, where inflation throughout the year is influenced by external and domestic factors. That's all for me. Thank you very much.
Moving on to the chart shown at the screen, we can actually see the percentage of producer price index from 1997 to until 2001. The highest level recorded was in the year of 1998 as the producer price index of SPPI increased by 10.7%. The largest increase in prices was registered in the animal and vegetable oil and fat subs index, due largely to higher prices of palm oil arising mainly from valuation effects from the weaker ringgit. Meanwhile, higher import prices due to the weaker ringgit and higher local production costs contributed to substantial increase in the prices of machinery and transport equipment, manufactured goods, manufactured articles and chemical products, which together accounted of the weight in the PPI basket. However, there was a decline in the producer price index by 3.3% in 1999, compared with an increase of 10.7% in 1998. The decline was on account of lower import prices as well as lower local production costs. In 1999, producers paid lower prices for most imported commodities, which more than offset the higher prices paid by producers to import beverage and tobacco, chemicals and related products and other manufactured items. Significantly higher increases in prices of mineral fuels and related materials, a trend observed since July 1999 due mainly to increases in world oil price, could no longer offset the lower declines in the price of animal and vegetable oils such as palm oil. I will pass to the next presenter.
Assalamualaikum. As we can see here in the graph, the real GDP growth became negative in 1985 for the first time since 1975. This is because the consequence of recession was a sharp contraction in cash flow for many companies in Malaysia, since their income declined sharply in the face of weak export sales and poor domestic demand, including delayed debt collection, while committed outflows, particularly in the property sector, continued to drain collection. As inflation fell to almost zero level, the M1 became negative by the end of 1984, while M3 down sharply by 1987. During this period, the private sector expenditure was initially slowed down to adjust the declining income, resulting in a drawdown of private sector savings. The combinations of tight liquidity, in low inflation and and a sharp decline in a share property price brought sharply into focus financial overcommitment of many entrepreneurs. Those who had built their gross asset base mainly through speculation in shares and property and finance through excessive were caught in triple squeeze with a sharp decline in income flow, collapse in asset and rise in debt servicing. Next slide. Next slide, the monetary growth slowed down significantly in 1998 in the period of severe economic contraction. The growth in money supply decelerated sharply as credit growth slowed down rapidly in environments of sluggish economic activity, weak business prospect, lower private potential, as well as cautious lending policies of banking institutions amidst rising non-performance loans. I think that's all. I pass to another person.
Assalamualaikum, Doctor. Now we move to interest rates and exchange rates. This graph presents the volatility of the average 3-month fixed deposit rate of the commercial banks and the Ringgit Malaysia United States dollar exchange rate. Also indicated on the same chart are some of the major shocks to the economy that could have affected the volatility of financial prices. On average, volatility of interest rate is considerably lower than the exchange rate. This suggests that the exchange rate responds faster to shocks in the economy. The exchange rate of the ringgit to United States dollar was very volatile following the floating of the ringgit in June 1973. The commodity price shock that occurred after the transition to a floating exchange rate regime only served to exaggerate this volatility. Apart from the two out price shock, economic recession and currency speculation were the other main shocks influencing the volatility in the exchange rate of the ringgit against the United States dollar. Volatility of the exchange rate was on declining trend and was lowest in 1990. The graph shows a sharp increase in volatility experienced during 1997. The movement in the exchange rate in the ringgit in 1997 was strongly influenced by the contagion effects of development in the region. The assessment of the interest rate in Malaysia is based on movement of deposit rates. Volatility of this rate was relatively low during the 1970s. During this period, deposit rates of the commercial banks were administratively set through consultation between the commercial banks and Bank Negara Malaysia. Consequently, interest rates were changed frequently. Deposit rates were liberalised in 1978 with commercial banks free to set the deposit rate. Consequently, during most of the 1980s, interest rates were relatively volatile, reflecting to the competitive pricing of deposits in response to changing liquidity conditions in the banking system. There was a brief respite in this volatility during 1986 and until 1987 when Bank Negara Malaysia introduced the back interest rate system. However, volatility increased again when the system was removed in 1987. Next, I will pass to the next presenter.
Okay, so next I will focus in fiscal in terms of tax and government expenditure. So as we look in the graph, the government is trying to strengthen the economy with financial and corporate restructuring exercise as well as issuance of bonds by Khazanah Malaysia, the federal government investment aim. As a result, the guaranteed debt of the government increased from 23 billion at the end of 1997 to 48 billion. This is not as what we expect to have any adverse impact on fiscal sustainability. Most of the debt guarantees was for the companies that will be able to generate sufficient revenue to meet their obligations. Nevertheless, in an environment of external uncertainty, the government...
Sorry, interrupt, Aina. Can you raise your voice because I can hear you?
Oh, okay. Wait. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Dennis? Hello? Hello?
Yes, Aina, you can continue your presentation.
Okay. So I will continue nevertheless, in an environment of external uncertainty, the government is committed to monitor potential new obligations very closely to obtain the contingent liabilities and thereby minimize financial risk. Okay, slide. Okay, if you look in this slide, in this regard, both fiscal and monetary policies have been carefully applied to support economic recovery while preserving Malaysia's economic fundamentals. So overall, to ensure that public debt remains at manageable levels, a legislated borrowing rule stipulates the ceiling for federal government debt. That's all from me. Thank you. I will pass to the next presenter, Danish.
So for my part is next slide Aina. Next slide Zulaika. For my part is the how the government pay for the all expenditure. As we know that you must wonder, right, how the government get the money and so on to get the fund for the all the expenditure. So Zulaika, please next slide. So for this part I want just touch about the from the security part, source of fund from security. So you can see the graph, source of fund from security I get from Bank Negara Malaysia, shown that the through the government MGS, we call that Malaysian Government Security, is we call that the bonds. So from 2019, 2011 to 2019, is look at the trend of the graph is like trend rose up because the government in 2019 we know that it's happened for COVID-19 crisis. We know that made a slow down the economy activity and so on. So to recover from this crisis, the government make the huge budget to spending in 2019. So the government need more money and fund for the pay all this expenditure. So you can see in 2020 is the higher one security. So through Malaysian Government Security MGS, or we call MGII, Malaysian Government issue insurance like that. So Malaysia government sell a lot of MGS to the own people or the corporate company through the MyBank and RSB Bank market to get the fund to make the fiscal injection with a lot of stimulus package such as like Penjana, Prihatin and so on. So we know that the COVID-19 is the government need a more fund. So this thing that a government solve all the security to get the fund because we know for the COVID-19 is the revenue of the government very low, and this one solution to get the fund to pay all the expenditure. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, now my turn to present about the trend of fiscal debt imbalance or imbalance in Malaysia from 1997 to current year by using the graph. I will touch the important event that happened in certain year only. Firstly, as we can see, the graph show that the overall fiscal balance in 1998 was recorded deficit of 1.8% of GDP from the surplus of 2.4% of GDP in 1997. Next, the overall balance continued decline to 5.2% of GDP in 2001. It comes from the impact of the global electronic downturn at 11 of September 2001. In 2003, the overall fiscal balance still deficit around 5% of GDP, but the deficit was reduced. At the same time, the severe acute respiratory syndrome (SARS) was outbreak, and the Iraq war affected the world economy. In 2007, the government successfully to reduce the deficit to 3.1% of GDP and embarked on the fiscal austerity path. It is because the economy strongly recovered during 2003 to 2007. However, the fiscal balance was fell drastically in that 6.7% of GDP due to the global financial crisis that affect the Malaysian economy. As the result, the government was successfully to reduce the fiscal deficit to 2.9% of GDP in 2017 because they focus on the protecting jobs, key retaining and training, and facilitating the private sector. And last but not least, in 2020, the COVID-19 crisis was attacked the various sector in the world, especially the economic sector. So we can identify the overall fiscal balance in 2020 was deficit around 26% of GDP. That's all from me. I will pass to the next presenter.
Hello. Next, I will be present about the trends in fiscal policy, measures taken by federal government and also the agency. I will be starting from the 1997, which is the fiscal policy have been assumed to become the biggest role to address the economy's underlying vulnerabilities, such as account deficit and the national resource gap. The broad aim by the government to ensure that the sustainable economic growth with the price stability and also the external equilibrium over the long term. The government also maintained a tax structure that would provide a conducive environment to the private sector growth and reduce inflationary pressure. In 2001, the main thrust of the policy fiscal is to stimulate the nation's economic growth by implementing strategic initiatives to enhance the nation's competitiveness and also to achieve the agenda of a caring society. While in 2006, the fiscal policy is aimed to enhance the microeconomic fundamentals and also to promote a more broadly economic structure. While in 2011, the fiscal policy is geared up towards the transforming the nation into a developed and high income economy by focusing on measures that facilitate and enable to higher level of private sector, providing resources to eradicate hardcore and urban poverty, and also to assist the poor and vulnerable group by increasing the home ownership. Next, we move to 2016. The fiscal policy is focused on the high impact infrastructure project with larger multiplier effects. Therefore, it is also in line with the objective of the 11th Malaysia Plan and also that chart the development priorities of the government for the next 5 years, which is from 2016 to 2020. But in 2021, it is a crucial situation for Malaysia to achieve the macroeconomic stability and also sound public finances. Therefore, the fiscal stance needs to be more flexible and also to operate more of the efficacy of the tax and also expenditure measures in the charting to the nation development path. To be concluded that entering the new decade of from 2011 to 2020, the government is continuing to implement more fiscal reforms through the Bold Finance Management Initiative. Next, the measures taken by the federal government. Several fiscal measures were introduced in the third quarter of 1997. It is to manage the level of aggregate demand and to contain the current account deficit. This measure is included an immediate 2% of cut across the board in government spending, the development of several large infrastructure projects, for example, like Bakum Hydroelectric Project, the Kuala Lumpur Linear City, and also the Northern International Airport. The government also provided an additional tax incentive to support the strategy of productivity driven growth. Move forward to 2001, the government announced a package of stimulative measures to strengthen the domestic demand. This measure is included by point 1, 2, and 3, which is an additional fiscal stimulus, the reduction in employee share of the contribution to EPF by 2% point for 1 year, and also the removal of tax on credit card. Next, in 2006, the government has put in these various incentives for development of industry with high growth potential, including the ICT, biotechnology, modern agriculture, halal food industry, and also the Islamic finance. The government also enhanced the business-friendly environment to attract the foreign direct investment and also to promote private investment by strengthening the public service delivery. Next, in 2011, these measures are guided by the strategies outlined in the 10th Malaysia Plan, 6 national key result area, and also the 12 national key economics areas. It is focuses on the reinvigorate private investment and boost domestic demand. That in 2016, the government will continue to implement the to further consolidate its fiscal position. This measure include varying the growth of operating expenditures, which is the rationalization of subsidy and also the reduction of non-critical spending on supplies and services. Last but not least, to cushion the adverse impact of the pandemic on the domestic economy, the government announced a series of economic stimulus packages and also recovery plan, which is the recovery plan initially worth more than 295 billion ringgit or 20% of gross domestic product. These initiatives, namely the economic stimulus package, PRE, Prihatin SME, and also the Pejana. The government also will continue to focus on the recovery measures to revitalize the economy and also support business activity and also to protect the well-being of the rakyat, like investing in the public infrastructure projects. The government also provide the sizable allocation to ensure the better quality healthcare and also accessibility to health service. Next, I will proceed with the agency atas to do that. Atas to do. In 1998, there is a National Economic Action Council, which is to protect the global competitiveness of Malaysia's economy, taking steps to prevent economic recession due to external shock and also to strengthen the country's economic base. This national at the National Recovery Council is to ensure the recovery plan to see the country out of COVID-19 crisis and also to solve four major crises of the country, which are health, economic, political, and also the social, including the education. Next, I will proceed to Michelle.
Okay, next I will talk about the trans federal government fiscal and debt. The crisis have substantially impact the government's fiscal position and debt level, where the government has been at the forefront in dealing with this challenge. Because of Asian financial crisis that happened on 1997, the government need to embark on an expansionary fiscal policy with the unveiling of a fiscal stimulus package worth 2 billion ringgit in July 1998. One of the strategies to further support the economy includes the setting up of Pengurusan Dana Harta Nasional Berhad to purchase the non-performing loans from financial institutions and maximize asset recovery value. This action result in a fiscal deficit of 1.8% during the year 1998. After the Asian financial crisis, the debt level rose to a low from pump payment measure. Pump payment measure ni refers to the step taken to stimulate spending in an economy during or after a recession. The 2008 and 2009, the global financial crisis was triggered by the supreme mortgage in the US housing market, which nearly paralyzed the global financial system. The government introduced two various of stimulus package were 67 billion ringgit. The funds provided by the stimulus package were allocated to projects that have high and immediate multiplier impact on the economy. The implementation of policy measures, however, had caused a marked increase in the deficit level. This is the higher deficit level between 1919 until 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic had severely affected the global trade and economy as it tainted the life of people due to its rapid spread. Malaysia has introduced stimulus package and economy recovery plans worth 295 billion ringgit comprising fiscal and non-fiscal with direct fiscal injection of 45 billion ringgit. On 23 September 2020, the government announced an additional 10 billion ringgit to further enhance inciting measure, namely the Bantuan Prihatin Nasional, Geran Khas Prihatin and Program Subsidi Upah. This action result in a fiscal deficit again during the year 2020. That's all from Group 6, Textbook 1 about Malaysian fiscal and monetary policy. Thank you.
What's your question, Doctor? Excuse me. Yes, Doctor. Um, so I would like to share what I understand based on this presentation. It starts from 1997, which is the I just understand the trends in fiscal policy, and 1997, which is the maintaining a tax structure, and 2001, which is achieving the agenda of a caring society.
So I answer for question from Zahara. What is the best fiscal policy response in combating COVID-19? So right now the government already respond for the COVID-19 19 crisis. So based on the policy, we see that the government already reduced for the OPR. While OPR is in OPR is OPR. What does it mean? OPR. Yeah, reduce OPR from 3% to 1 point. Yeah, overnight policy. So to the 1.75 I guess. Yeah, 1.5. So the money school. So the people can buy the. So next I want to touch about the subsidies. Also, government already made the subsidize for the small farmer and so on to reduce their burden on the financial crisis. So next is about the tax. Yes, the uh I think expenditure. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So yeah. So I think for monetary policy in 1997 is financial crisis, Asian financial crisis. Yeah, 85. So in 1997, the money of ringgit Malaysia has deficit, and we call in world. I think it's yeah. The Dr. Mahathir control the ringgit Malaysia from 1 USD to 3.8 ringgit Malaysia. To exploited the Malaysian ringgit Malaysia to from the economy to the international currency speculator to exploit it from to protect the currency of Malaysia. I think so. Yeah. Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and good evening to Doctor and our classmates. Today, our group T12 will be presenting about the East Asian financial crisis in 1937-1998. So, next slide. Next slide. Okay, so I will start with the introduction on how it started. So, even though it is known as the East Asian financial crisis, it was actually a huge worldwide financial crisis. It started in Asia and then it spreaded to the rest of the world. So how did it start? It started when Bangkok detached Thai baht from US dollar that triggered a series of devaluation and large capital outflows. So, currency of affected countries like Indonesian rupiah, Thai baht, Korean won, and Malaysian ringgit also fell by then. So, as you can see on the table on the slide, the GDP per capita of the affected countries had dropped during the start of the crisis. Next slide, please. Sorry. No, sorry, doctor. It was a mistake on my part. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I made a mistake there. Okay. Thank you, doctor. I think I made a mistake there. Okay, actually, the impact of the Asian financial crisis was not only limited to Asia. It actually expanded to Russian and Brazilian economies, then making it a global crisis. So, how did this happen? It is when international investors became less willing to invest and lend to developing countries, not only in Asia, but in other areas of the world as well. So, So this financial crisis in Asia had a wide range of impacts, and it can be viewed as a governance issue at all major political levels like national, global, and also regional. So, oh, okay, sorry, Doctor. Sorry, Doctor, I forgot. Okay. I think the East Asian financial crisis in 1997-1998 actually showed the dangers of premature financial liberalization in the absence of established regulatory regimes. Also, the insufficiency of exchange rates regimes, the issues with IMF prescriptions, and the general absence of social society nets in East Asia, which will be discussed in further presentation. So, and that is all for the introduction. So, I pass to the next presenter. Thank you. Sorry, so this is actually the timeline of the Asian financial crisis. You can see how it happened from 1997 to 1998. So that's all. Next slide. Yeah, so you can see from July, you can see, like I mentioned, the baht collapsed, and then followed by other countries that were affected as well until December 1997. Then it started to spread it more.
Okay, I will continue this presentation. For the question, what the central banks of the country affected it during this crisis. Doctor, I have a problem. My camera. Okay, I continue. BNM, Bank Negara Malaysia, take a few strategy to manage this crisis. First, make interest rate were low, drastically. This is to enable company and consumer to be able to conduct return transaction by borrow, which will then add investment and expenses. Second, to stabilize the exchange rate of the ringgit Malaysia. During this crisis, ringgit Malaysia was pegged at 3 ringgit 80 cent for each dollar. In this way, the fluctuation of the value and speculation of the ringgit Malaysia can be stopped immediately. This is important because it helps the country to continue to focus on implementing any macroeconomic policy that are capable of recovering the country from this crisis. And the third point, in the third strategy, closing Malaysia trade abroad and stop trading in Singapore. In this way, it can also avoid any speculation on ringgit Malaysia and local stock. Moving to the next point, controlling capital flows. This action is to control the flows of short-term capital, especially by foreigner and local peoples. This restriction are to prevent the transfer of the capital, the people, and local companies. The next point, at the time, government, BNM government not closing down financial institutions that are facing difficulties and problems. The government announced guarantees on the deposit for the bank and financial companies. The effect of this action has been able to increase confidence among the depositors in the country banking system. Malaysia also, as you know, Malaysia did not close down troubled financial and banking institutions as proposed by IMF, because Malaysia disagreed with IMF, and Malaysia also rejected the recovery package proposed by IMF. The last point is Malaysia also make restructure the capitalization of the corporate and banking sector for microeconomic recover. On on one sorry, on one of the strategy is to set up property fund that will manage asset to solve the problem of non-performing loans. And second, also to set up capital funds, which serve as a special agency to manage the capitalization of the troubled financial institution. And the last, government also established a corporate debt restructuring committee to facilitate corporate debt restructuring. Before I end this presentation, I just want to say that Malaysia rejected the recovery package proposed by IMF because at the time government said that the government does not want any outside interference to the economic management country, because when any country accepted the package from IMF, the country should be follow any policy by IMF. I take one example. For example, Indonesia. Indonesia, one of the country affected during this crisis, and finally, Indonesia must accept policy by IMF. For example, IMF proposed IMF proposed to close all banks with the critical problem to reduce the financial problem that need to be borne by the government in terms of funds. After Indonesia agreed to accept the plan recovery from IMF make research to economic Indonesia, and finally IMF proposed that Indonesia should be closed down 36 banks. But after that, Indonesia make negotiation with IMF, and then finally only 16 banks closed down in Indonesia during this crisis. I think that's all for me, and I will pass to my friend to continue his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, next, meeting among the central bankers or ministers of finance of countries affected or in ASEAN discussed. There were a lot of meetings that have been discussed, and among the meetings, wait. Doctor, can you see me? Oh. Yeah, wait. Okay. I have opened my camera, but if you can see me, I think that's a problem. May I continue? Okay, thank you, Doctor. Oh, I'm sorry. I have opened it, but yeah, I think there's something wrong with it. Okay, I will continue. Next for there were a lot of meetings that have been discussed, and among the meetings, these two are example of it. First, the Manila Framework. It happens on 18 to 19 November 1997 in Manila, where the Ministry of Finance and Central Bank deputies of 14 Asia-Pacific economies met to discuss an approach in restoring the financial stability in the region. They came up with new initiative called the Manila Framework. It includes regional surveillance and a regional financial arrangement. And the frameworks are for, first, a mechanism for regional surveillance to complement the global surveillance of the IMF. Second, enhanced economic and technical cooperation, particularly in strengthening domestic financial system and regulatory capacities. Third, the measure to strengthen the IMF capacity to respond to financial crisis. And last but not least is a cooperative financing arrangement that will supplement IMF resources. And also, the deputies also agreed to explore ways to supplement IMF and other international financial institution resources through a cooperative financing arrangement in the region. And for the ASEAN surveillance process, it happens at Kuala Lumpur the weeks later. The ASEAN finance minister concurred with the proposal of the Manila Framework and decided to implement it. First initiative from the Manila Framework was deliberated further at the second ASEAN Finance Minister meeting, AFMM, on 28 February 1998 in Jakarta. It was agreed that the ASEAN surveillance mechanism should be established immediately within the general framework of the IMF and with the assistance of the ADB, ASEAN Development Bank. And the details of the mechanism have been worked out by the senior ASEAN finance and central bank officials in consultation with representatives from the ADB. No, I have opened my camera, but I think there's something wrong with my MS Team. Okay, next presenter.
So here I will highlight my main point of measures taken by each respective countries. The details about the measure will be explained by the next presenter. Okay, first, Korea. The objective of Korea crisis resolution strategy were first to restore and stabilize financial markets, and second, to lay down the foundation for the resumption of sustained recovery in the real economy. So the program includes a mix of macroeconomic policies and far-reaching structural reform. Second, Korea reached agreement with foreign bank in early 1998 to extend the maturity of short-term claim on its bank to avoid default. And for Thailand, in the early stage of the program, Thailand authorities adopted monetary policy to manage flow of the BAF. And Thailand also enacted budget work cuts to free up resources to help finance the restructuring and to support improvement in the current account position. Okay, next slide. Okay, for Indonesia, in Indonesia, the Financial Sector Policy Committee was established with the mandate to provide leadership and direction in banking and corporate restructuring. And the objective is to... sorry, Doctor, I have problem with my data. And the objective is to enhance effort to restructure state bank. Secondly, to ensuring better governance and supervision of the banking system and the Indonesia Bank Restricting Agency or IBRA. Third objective is to deepening bond and equity markets. And last objective is reinforce asset recovery effort. Okay, so for Philippines, Philippines had embarked on a successful IMF supported program on macroeconomic adjustment and structural reform in the late 19 and early 19. And secondly, after crisis management mid-1997 was sound, Philippines adapted its policy, including through the floating of the peso and tightening of monetary policy and strengthening of the banking system. Next slide. Okay, for Malaysia, Malaysia imposed capital controls in September 1998, largely aimed Yes, largely aimed at the offshore ringgit market in Singapore and short-term portfolio flows. The control took the form of requirement to bring the ringgit onshore by end September and a one-year holding period for repatriation of portfolio capital inflow. The latter control were replaced in February 1999 with a system of graduated exit levies and further relaxed in September 1999. And for Singapore, Singapore economy managed to a relatively healthy performance compared to other countries in Asia during and after the financial crisis. Although the region close relationship and economic dependence remain negative to its economy, but overall, its ability to eliminate crisis is widely watched and improves Singapore fiscal policy research as a lesson for its neighboring country. And as an independent country, Singapore government managed to regulate its currency exchange rate to avoid potential specific attack. Next slide. Okay, so this the measure by Malaysia. First, initial approval of Malaysia in facing the crisis contains some prescription of the IMF on the financial. On the microeconomic policy front, it raised interest rate with the view to stemming capital outflow. The currency was floored to allow for free capital flows, and public expenditure was reduced by 18%. And on the financial sector side, Malaysia changed the definition for non-performing loans from 6-month arrears to 3 months arrears following international standard. In early 1998, it was clear that the prescription of IMF macroeconomic policies were not working. So Dr. Mahathir, our Prime Minister at that time, launched the National Economic Recovery Plan, introduced a selective capital control measure that were strongly opposed by the IMF at that time. And lastly, for foreign institutions and persons, a one-year moratorium from the purchase date of shares was imposed on repatriation of proceeds from the sale of the shares. That's all from me.
Okey, for number 6, pujian dan kritikan pada 1998 mengenai langkah tidak wajar ataupun unorthodox step yang telah dilakukan oleh Malaysia. Pujiannya ialah Malaysia merupakan negara kecil tapi mampu berdiri sendiri membangunkan ekonomi hanya menggunakan domestic resources. Yang kedua, Malaysia tidak perlu meminjam daripada IMF. Contohnya jiran Malaysia seperti Indonesia dan Thailand, mereka meminjam IMF dengan nilai US yang sangat banyak. Jadi Malaysia tidak terbeban dengan hutang daripada luar negara. Yang ketiga, Perdana Menteri iaitu Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad telah mengisytiharkan kawalan modal untuk menstabilkan mata wang ringgit Malaysia pada waktu itu. Selain pujian, Malaysia juga mendapat kritikan daripada negara luar mengenai cara Malaysia menangani krisis ekonomi pada 1998. Pada waktu itu, kawalan modal pertama diperkenalkan dan banyak negara Asia lain meragui keberkesanan kawalan modal. Disebabkan tidak meminta bantuan daripada negara luar seperti IMF, Malaysia mendapat kritikan bahawa ekonomi Malaysia akan lebih jatuh pada waktu itu. Dan akhir sekali, Malaysia mendapat kritikan mengenai penutupan ekonomi daripada ekonomi dunia. Okay, next slide.
Okay, so what did Malaysia do during the years of the crisis? Okay, actually this part is actually quite long, but I'll try to point out only the important parts. So in 1998, the government established a number of agencies to help restructure both financial and also non-financial institutions. As you can see in the slide, National Economic Action Council was set up by Tun Dr. Mahathir, and also Dana Harta and Dana Modal were also set up in the same year. Okay, and most importantly, what made Malaysia, I think, special in tackling the crisis, in the same year, an alternative to orthodox IMF policies was launched by Tun Dr. Mahathir, which is the National Economic Recovery Plan. It is to stabilize the local currency, restore market confidence, maintain financial market stability, restructure corporate debt, recapitalize and restructure the banking sector, and also revitalize the economy. Also, 1 year moratorium from the purchase rate was also imposed. Okay, next slide. So moving on to 1999, the economy actually started to recover. The capital and currency controls were also gradually removed, and also to tackle the recession on the monetary and financial sector front, Bank Negara loosened monetary policy by reducing interest rates gradually from 11% in July 1998 to 6% in May 1999, and also 3% in December 1999. So, next slide. Oh, sorry. Uh, expansionary fiscal policy. So, expansionary monetary policy. Okay. To wait. To encourage. To restart the economy. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, okay. Okay, okay. Okay, okay. So basically, 1999 is to restore the economy. Alright. So next slide. Okay, so lastly, in the year 2000, Tun Daim Zainuddin suggested that Malaysia should take action to create an efficient equity market and a bond to complete the existing banking system. Therefore, some steps have been taken, like the shelf registration scheme for private debt securities, market deepening for repos, and broadening investor targets, develop long-term strategic plans, and also creating a form of financial guarantee to the bond market. So in conclusion, with all the measures done by the government, Malaysia's recovery in 1999 to the year 2000 was among the strongest of the Asian crisis economies. So I think that is all from me. Thank you. I pass to the next one.
Okay, doctor. Oh, sorry, I cannot open my camera. Sorry, doctor. Okay.
I will be focusing on criticism and praise that Malaysia received in currency crisis. So first, I'm gonna talk about criticism. Okay, first, risky move taken by Tun Dr. Mahathir received criticism from the leaders all around the world. So, first point is Malaysia was attacked by currency speculators who led to comprehensive sales in the stock market and exchange money. So, this was happened after the currency attack has happened in Thailand on July 8, 1997. So, how did it go is the KLSE index, which is KLSE stands for Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange, plunged from 1,200 points to below 600 points. And the ringgit Malaysia depreciated by 50% from 2 ringgit 50 sen to 4 ringgit 10 sen per dollar. But then, Dr. Mahathir decided to establish capital controls and set the value of the ringgit at 3 ringgit 80 cent per US dollar. However, yeah, hmm, hmm, I yes. Hmm, hmm. Uh, Thank you, Doctor, for the extra knowledge. Um, may I continue? Okay, next. Okay, however, the criticism turns out to be a praise because Malaysia's solution to overcome the economic and currency crisis in 1998 has received praise from many parties. Why? Because even Dr. Mahathir decided to take risky steps to overcome currency crisis. Malaysia's economic situation is not as bad as the other countries' economies because our government has taken steps to limit foreign borrowing and imposed strict regulations and controls on the banking sector. Okay, next point is Malaysia doesn't need IMF help at all to overcome the crisis. So IMF stands for International Monetary Fund, and it is crucial for a country to cooperate with IMF because IMF is an organization of 190 countries, and the function is to secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, and so on. So it is quite risky for a country to not cooperate with IMF. But then Malaysia did it. Malaysia did it without IMF help at all. The merger of banks has successfully strengthened capital, and it also increased the competitiveness of banks in Malaysia. With all of these steps, it is considered as an innovative, effective solution and thinking outside box. The IMF before, which was initially skeptical of the risky steps taken by Malaysia, later recognized it as a method to be emulated. Okay. Uh, mm, mm. Thank you, Doctor, for correcting me. The end. Let's still notice more information. Okay, the end of my part. Thank you for listening to my part. I will pass this presentation to the next presenter.
Before that, doctor, I really sorry if my voice is not good because my place is right now is raining. I am from Kuala Lumpur, Kramat, Kramat. Okay, I will start my presentation. So I will share between these three countries overcome financial exchange crisis. Maybe this before this previous presenter have explained a little about this uh, uh, movement from this three country. So the first one, I go to Indonesia. So the IMF has arrived to Indonesia and give a packaging assistance around 43 billion US dollar. So what Indonesia doing, government Indonesia is to restructuring the banking system, such as they are doing a Indonesian Bank Restructure Agency, and also they are support by Financial Sector Policy Committee to provide the leadership and also the direction in banking. For the monetary policy, Bank Indonesia has to support commercial banks as they want to expand the monetary in the country. And this program has been shown to return positive for their economy by mid-June. The graph showed that rupiah currency have more strength before the start of the crisis. In 1999, Indonesia recovered fully from the financial ASEAN crisis. So move on to the Korea. Korea IF also helped the Korea to approve the financial assistance up to 21 billion. They also have another financial assistance from the country like United States and also Japan to help the financial assistance. For monetary policies, because of they have they want to avoid the inflation and stabilize the currency. They also increase the interest rates like Malaysia. And to improve the social safety, Korean government has implement the employment of insurance systems. So between these three countries, Korea has the fastest to overcome this financial ASEAN crisis than other these three countries. Because of they because of the won and the stabilizing of the economy of Korean industry have been more positive rather than the other country. Okay. Move to the Thailand. From this slide, I showed that the financial assistance from Thailand is about 17.2 billion USD dollar. But Thailand also overcome the financial problem faster. So they only acquire about 14.1 billion from the financial assistance only. So the financial institutions restructured the key of the policy for Thailand program. They are focusing to improve the liquidation of finance and overcome the banking system because the system when it happened when ASEAN crisis is really bad on that time. So it showed that Thailand have been positive in late 1998, began to grow their positive currency. So like I said before,
they are stopped borrowing from IMF after September 1999 because of they are overcome the Asian financial crisis. So for the other country, the next presenter will explain about it. Thank you, Doctor.
Reason of okay. Reason of the country recover faster. The next. Yeah, I already opened my cam. Wait. Right now, Doctor. Okay. Okay, yang pertama ialah Malaysia. Malaysia adalah satu-satunya negara Asia yang memperkenalkan kawalan modal dan tidak meminta bantuan daripada IMF. Jadi Malaysia tidak terhutang dengan negara luar. Seterusnya, Malaysia hanya menggunakan domestic resources yang terdapat di Malaysia untuk membangunkan balik ekonomi Malaysia. Seterusnya, next slide. Okay, Thailand, Indonesia and South Korea. Mereka adalah negara yang meminjam daripada IMF, meminjam dolar daripada IMF untuk meningkatkan kembali ekonomi mereka. Jadi pada waktu itu mereka hanya membayar duit pinjaman dalam masa yang lebih awal daripada perjanjian yang telah mereka perjanjikan untuk menjalankan dan seterusnya menjalankan ekonomi seperti biasa. Okey, seterusnya. Okey, ini pula Japan, Singapura, China dan Taiwan. Mereka adalah negara Asia yang tidak terpukul oleh krisis ekonomi, tidak terlalu terpukul oleh krisis ekonomi. Jadi mereka hanya mata wang mereka adalah jatuh sedikit berbanding negara Asia lain dan mereka hanya menjalankan ekonomi mereka seperti biasa, seperti tiada apa-apa yang berlaku. Okey, seterusnya.
Advantages. So, there are certain areas where the IMF fails to address the member nations. Okay, and the resources of the disposal of the IMF are not fit to the needs of the which is a of assets. Such as capital employed in the financial system necessitated the strengthening of finance. So the resources of the fund may be enhanced by the quota, but liberal countries are reluctant to increase the quota of the fund. Okay, for the second one, one of the important objectives of the IMF has been to remove foreign restrictions. Okay, with reset growth of global trade. Okay, still, member countries follow a trend of since okay, so the consequently the okay. Now you can hear me. Turn off my hello. Yes. And not being effective in promoting exchange stability and maintaining orderly.
They are already turned off my camera. Oh, now you can hear me? Hello? Okay. Okay, next, the IMF has been passive in its approach and not been effective in promoting exchange stability and maintaining an orderly exchange arrangement. Okay, for the example, in August 1971, US used convertibility of dollar in currency, so it exchange policies. Okay, this event simply proved that IMF was not able to maintain a uniform international exchange system. Okay, for the okay, uh, high interest rate charged on its advantage of the major. Okay, all right. So the conclusion of this advantages of um the monetary fund is despite its lofty status and commendable objectives. Okay, the F is attempting to pull off the nearly impossible economic feat, perfectly timing and sizing economic intervention on an international scale. So it suffers with suffers some disadvantage that I already told clearly lah. Right. Sorry.
Okay, good morning. Good evening, Doctor. This question is the same as number 8 there. My line is not stable, sorry. Dia akan tiba-tiba putus ah. This question is the same as number 8 that have been presented by Yasmin. So we move to next question. Now we discuss about analysis today by academics, international bodies, including the IMF itself. Is Malaysia is right? Okay, policymakers should not be tied to IMF orthodoxy. Rather, they should be pragmatic and flexible in their policies and guided by overall national objectives. Fiscal, monetary, and banking policies should be counter rather than pro-cyclical. They should be willing to use instruments other than the normal monetary one to attain these objectives. Malaysia adopted selective capital controls to stabilize trade, capital flows, and exchange rates, and adapted or moved this as conditions changed. At that time, such policies was considered heretical, yet today even the IMF is advocating selective control as a legitimate tool to manage economy and financial stability. Today, as many emerging countries face excess inflationary pressures resulting from excess liquidity created by quantitative easing and carry trades, policymakers should be willing to use additional tools to manage their current increase and capital flows. Okay, next.
Hello. Sorry, Doctor. It's raining here, so I afraid that my internet connection buat masalah. Okay. Now I will present about our own analysis whether measure action is correct or not. Yes, in our opinion, our Prime Minister Tun Dr. Sri Mahathir made the correct decision by rejecting IMF loan assistance. Tun Dr. Mahathir taught us a lesson with this decision that we as a nation should not expect others to solve our problems. Rather, we must think outside the box in order to defend our own beloved homeland.
So we support and believe Malaysia actions are correct for several reasons. The first one is Malaysia did not require assistance at the time because the country foreign currency reserve was still sufficient to survive. The current country debt also was small and the other debt had a long repayment period. We are also less certain of the IMF loans effectiveness. So what's wrong if we take a different action? Secondly, we consider the effect of one of our closest neighbors, Indonesia, suffering as a result of IMF loans. They are experiencing worsening currency depreciation after signing the agreement. For example, their currency has become worth 16,000 rupiah to $1 compared to 2,500 rupiah before they signed the agreement. So we also expect Malaysia fate to be similar to that of the Indonesia if we follow the same path. So the third one is the nature of the IMF, which only seek to make a profit, is very concerning. We can imagine that if they control Malaysia finance, no assistance will be provided for social good, but only for profit. This is demonstrated when they force the Indonesian government to stop providing food and oil subsidies to their people. Fourth, Malaysia as an independent country, what is the point of us as an independent country still following the lead of outsiders in making decisions? That is similar to how they colonize us and control our economy for their own benefit. Lastly, seeing the impact on South Korea, they borrow from the IMF and agree to the IMF terms. The implementing a new labor policy resulted in high expectation of layoff among South Korea, as evidenced by the fact that unemployment rate tripled from 2.05% in 1997 to 6.96% in 1999. So this can be happen to Malaysia too if Malaysia take IM loan. In conclusion, it is true that in Thailand and South Korea, there has also been recovery and growth even they take the IM assistance. But we know that Malaysia policy example encourage the IMF to relax its initial contractionary fiscal and interest rate policies in the three countries. And thus that the Malaysian policies indirectly assisted the recovery in this country. So plan Datuk Seri Mahathir ni bantulah antara semua negara dalam masa krisis ni. Okay, itu saja daripada saya.
Next for the last part, the Malaysian measures introduced can be applied again today in Malaysia or other countries. For the financial crisis in Malaysia, the same step may be possible but should also look at the root cause of the problem. However, for other countries, it may not be suitable because we have to look at their economic system and so on. For example, in the 1997-1998 financial crisis, although the IMF provided financial loans, Malaysia did not take it. Malaysia used their own domestic financial resources. But for some other countries like Indonesia, they accept it. This is because if the debt exceeds 60% of the GDP, it will raise the interest rates. This may cause us not to come out of the indebted group and bring down the status of the country to be economically unstable. Therefore, the Malaysian government used more internal funds to refinance economic activities. Internal financial resources such as internal loans as the EPF, IRB, and opening government bonds is a wise move by the government as this does not involve the outflow of national currency. This action also will strengthen the country's foreign exchange rate, and the strength of the currency is important for the long-term stability. And at that time, the Malaysian currency was pegged at 2 ringgit 80 cent, which means that no more currency speculation activities can be done because 2 ringgit 80 cent is the highest limit of the ringgit exchange rate against the US dollar. Thank you.
conclusion, I think Malaysia did the right choice in doing the orthodox move compared to other countries. We have a question from P9. The question is, what is the main reason this financial crisis happened? I think it is because of the speculators attack, but anyone would like to elaborate more? My group member.
I will. Okay, kami ikut apa yang pendapat Datuk Dr. Mahathir, iaitu ini adalah disebabkan speculation attack, iaitu di mana investor ni pull out Thai baht and sold for USD because of fast analysis. Ini membuatkan Thai baht ni depreciate. Lepas tu makin teruk bila debt in USD ni almost double due to devaluation, yang membuatkan Thai bank ni goes bankrupt because they don't have enough foreign reserve to pay the debt. Lagi satu, kenapa di effect all Asia? Because this is because of contagious effect, yang investor ni fikir ASEAN ni semua adalah sama. Mereka takut yang negara-negara ASEAN ni akan bankrupt juga. So mereka jual currency negara-negara ASEAN ni, yang membuatkan nilai-nilai ringgit dan ada ASEAN currency depreciate. Itu saja.
15 minutes. 15 minutes. 5:30 we start. Oh,
No.
okay, Doctor.
Thank you,
Okay,
Doctor.
Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.